Part 41. Man at the Top of the Food Chain. Author, Xionglang Guo. Chapter 401. In the space of the universe 50 million kilometers away from the magic star, various bizarre and unprecedented phenomena are constantly colliding fiercely in this void. What is vacuum? It is a sea of energy that fluctuates constantly. When the energy reaches its peak, it is transformed into pairs of positive and negative elementary particles. When the energy reaches the trough, pairs of positive and negative particles annihilate each other and convert into energy. For Li Anping and Dionysus, it is the vacuum that is not empty. The vacuum zero-point energy everywhere has become their infinite source of power. But the different fighting habits of the two people still form two completely different ways of fighting. Li Anping kept moving around Dionysus at high speed. His body was almost completely in a semi-decomposed state. In this environment without air resistance and gravity, his speed was constantly released, exceeding tens of thousands of meters per second, and it was still increasing. He seemed to have turned into countless rays of light, constantly stabbing at Dionysus, who was standing still. Every second, thousands of fists were thrown at the opponent, and each punch triggered countless collisions between positrons and electrons, releasing huge energy after the annihilation reaction. It was equivalent to thousands and tens of thousands of hydrogen bombs swallowing and spitting out surging destructive power towards Dionysus every second. Any punch here, if it appeared on the Earth, would cause a huge disaster of the level of annihilation, but in the vast universe, it became an invisible dot. And his opponent was not injured by this level of attack. Because Dionysus was a top powerhouse at the same level as Li Anping. Facing the annihilation level attacks released by Li Anping, he was always able to break them one by one with continuous upper level magic. Fire, freezing, lightning and other destructive spells were more than 1,000 times more powerful in his hands. And his brain structure seemed to be different from that of normal people, or he used some magic as an aid. No matter how fast Li Anping was, he could not escape his reaction. And from time to time, a high-level time freeze can give him a lot of extra casting time, and even give him a slight advantage in the battle with Li Anping. But there was no complacency in his eyes. Even if he couldn't find anyone with a fighting power close to his on the magic star, he had imagined countless battles of this level in his mind. When people of their level start fighting, with the endless sea of energy, as long as there is no absolute gap, then a few days, weeks, months, or even years of fighting time is possible. While he was thinking about this, the magic on his body did not stop at all. Countless hurricanes suddenly gushed out of his body, and then spread rapidly around like a violent cyclone. Dionysus's thoughts directly turned into a mental wave, which was transmitted to Li Anping's mind in a form similar to electromagnetic waves. He continued to communicate with the other party. Remember 500 years ago, I started a long journey, in your words, it is interstellar travel. Thanks to the existence of the portal, if you have my magic, you will have an advantage over you in the universe. I have passed by dozens of planets, but I have not found any life. But even so, the different environments of various planets have also given me countless inspirations. In the time it took to say these few words, the cyclones around became stronger and stronger, and countless particles were glued together to form a storm visible to the naked eye. When Dionysus finished speaking the sentence, the storm cyclone had grown to a terrifying cyclone of 30,000 meters long and more than 10,000 meters in height. Dionysus went on to say, there is a planet that has left a deep impression on me. It is made entirely of gas, like a whirlwind. The ubiquitous ocean and storm make up its body. It is so beautiful that it is fascinating. Just like now. As Dionysus spoke, Li Anping and his eyes were engulfed by countless gases. Hurricanes with speeds exceeding 400 kilometers per hour blew in their ears, and from time to time they could see a 4,000-meter or even 6,000-meter high cloud tower being born around them. In just a few words, Dionysus has created a place similar to a gaseous planet, but this is a beautiful scene for them, but for ordinary people it is a forbidden zone for life and an endless hell. The atmospheric dragon that is enough to tear everything apart roars in their ears from time to time. Hurricanes that crush all matter into fine particles can be seen everywhere. The low temperature of more than 200 degrees below zero is the normal temperature here. In such a harsh environment, even a level 5 ability user may not be able to hold on for long and will die immediately. If the wizard had released countless protective magics in advance, he might have been able to hold on for a few more hours. The destructive magic that manipulated the storm in front of him could already be called a miracle. Just relying on the cosmic storm created by this magic, Dionysus already had the power to destroy all humans on a planet. After thousands of years of accumulation, although you haven't figured out the essence of this universe, you have indeed discovered many interesting tricks. In this violent cyclone that was enough to destroy a planet, Li Anping still didn't show any panic on his face, but the excitement in his eyes became stronger and stronger. The atmospheric knife that could be seen everywhere in the air, when it scraped against him, was like an obedient kitten, and could not leave any trace on his body. When he spoke, he did not use electromagnetic waves at all, but just spoke out word by word with his mouth, and then it was as if every word he said had real power, controlling the airflow around him and sending this sound wave to Dionysus's ear. Facing Li Anping's words, Dionysus asked slowly, "A little trick? Then what is the so-called essence of the universe?" While saying these words, the storm around him roared like a giant dragon, and the cyclone that was more than tens of thousands of meters long trembled, giving people the feeling that the whole world was roaring with Dionysus' words. Then, they rushed towards Li Anping, who was in the center of the storm, regardless of everything. Facing the crazy attack coming in front of him, Li Anping saw nothing but airflow, and the boundless wind cut towards him at a speed of more than 400 kilometers per second. From the outside, it looked like a gaseous planet was collapsing violently and collapsing inwards. Li Anping only shook his arms lightly, lowered his waist and sat on the horse, and then punched out. After the punch, time seemed to stop at this moment, marveling at the surging power. The storm in front of him was like a cake cut in half with a knife. With Li Anping's punch, the storm, which was 12,000 meters deep, was directly split into two. What is the destruction of the world? What is the collapse of the sky and the collapse of the earth? Li Anping's punch was the destruction of the world, the collapse of the sky and the collapse of the earth. After the punch was thrown, Li Anping's figure flashed and appeared in front of Dionysus again. He laughed grimly, and his entire right fist had turned into a ray of light, shining on Dionysus in front of him. A ray of light is not an adjective, but Li Anping's entire right palm really turned into light. If Dionysus was just surprised when Li Anping broke the cosmic storm he created with one punch, then after Li Anping threw this punch, his surprise had turned into shock. What is the speed of light? It is 300,000 kilometers per second. Dionysus did not have the opportunity to react at all. Hundreds of thousands of punches had completely destroyed all the force fields and barriers on his body. And then before the surrounding storm swallowed him, it completely tore his body apart. However, long before the half-plane was released and entered the universe, Dionysus had already elementalized his body into a gaseous form. Although Li Anping's attack tore his body apart, it still did not really hurt him. Dionysus' body turned into the omnipresent wind, and quickly retreated behind him. He said in surprise, "What happened to your attack just now? What happened to your arm?" Li Anping stood still, but his arm, which had turned into a piece of light, had returned to its original state. The difference was that in the palm of his arm, there was a small ball of gas flowing continuously, as if struggling to escape, but was tightly held in Li Anping's hand. Dionysus's face changed, that was part of his gasified body. But the next moment, Li Anping's action made his face change drastically. I saw Li Anping's palm loosen, and the escaping white airflow was sucked into his stomach by his mouth. "You You actually ate me. Dionysus's shock and anger only earned Li Anping's bloodthirsty eyes. He slowly said, I am very, very, very interested in your current body. With a flash of his body, he approached Dionysus again, give me a little more. As Li Anping finished speaking, Dionysus had already activated time to stop, giving him an extra 10 seconds of casting time, allowing him to add millions of protective magic to himself at once. When time resumed flowing, his body was almost countless times harder than the strongest magic fortress on the Mondo continent. Now, even if he faced a positron cannon, he could retreat unscathed. Seeing Dionysus wrapped like a lantern, Li Anping asked coldly, are you scared? The next moment, his arms disappeared together, all turned into light, and hit Dionysus at the speed of light. Millions of defensive magics were torn and destroyed in an instant. When Dionysus activated the teleportation to escape, his gaseous body was taken away by Li Anping again. The roar full of shame and anger sounded through the entire cosmic storm. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xionglang Guo. Chapter 402. Eat it, then swallow it, swallowing the white air completely into your throat. Seeing Li Anping repeat this action again, Dionysus felt shocked and angry, you madman. Li Anping casually smashed the storm coming around him and said coldly, a flashy attack at the same time, his body chewed the opponent's body, and countless information and data emerged from his brain. Analysis: the secret of elementalization. Dionysus roared, and his furious spirit was already controlling the tens of thousands of meters of storm around him, like a huge meat grinder, twisting towards Li Anping's body. The terrifying power contained in it is enough to open a large hole directly on the planet and reach the center of the Earth. Li Anping looked at the terrifying storm that filled his vision and said slowly, I admire your power, but when it comes to real battles, I am greatly disappointed. Li Anping looked at the storm around him and said calmly, look at your self-created magic. It's full of expression. It bullies and bullies people who are weaker than you. His effect is amazing, but when you encounter people who are as strong as you, or even stronger than you, from now on, these are bullshit attacks on people who are still strong. Always copying and piling up these gorgeous natural phenomena. It's like an empty article. The writing is beautiful but has no connotation. The next moment, Li Anping punched out, and the power that was enough to destroy the entire continental shelf was concentrated on one point, tearing apart all the storms along the way in 1 second, and blasting hard towards the location of Dionysus. Go. But this time, Dionysus didn't defend himself at all. His whole body gradually faded and turned into countless hurricanes that dispersed around. In the end, he was integrated with the entire cyclone and completely transformed into part of the cosmic storm, and then the whole storm seemed to come alive. Countless hurricanes formed the image of Dionysus, saying angrily, Li Anping, you will pay the price for your arrogance. He. Are you arrogant? I can feel that the fear in your heart has become more serious. Li Anping swept the space in front of him as if he had opened a kilometers-long incision, and he had already cleared away the countless attacks in front of him. The hurricane turned invisible, turning his surroundings into a vacuum of several hundred meters. Look at you, you look like a white swan in a chicken farm, thinking you are superior, and look at these magic tricks you have come up with. They are all used to bully the weak. Once you deal with someone as strong as you, even those who are stronger than you are nothing but beautiful. When Li Anping finished speaking, Dionysus was no longer talking. Instead, he decided to use actions to make the other party pay a heavy price for his rudeness. Seeing that ordinary storms were ineffective against Li Anping, he changed his attack method again. Only a little light was born from the depths of the storm, just like a single spark can start a prairie fire. The next moment, overwhelming flames filled Li Anping's eyes. The endless firelight even illuminated the entire void nearby. It was the fire released by Dionysus himself, which ignited the entire storm. If the previous storm was a gaseous planet, then the entire cosmic storm was ignited. Has become a little Sunday. The huge fire even shone directly on the Mondo continent a few minutes later, and a second sun appeared in the sky, causing the entire Mondo people to marvel. The battle between the two has caused changes in the celestial phenomena. The scene in front of him also reminded Li Anping of the simulated sun that the Queen of Heaven and others had used underground in Tianjing. However, compared with the simulated sun used by the Queen of Heaven and others, the sun created by Dionysus in front of him can be regarded as a real small sun. Huge pressure, terrifying heat. Nuclear fusion reactions occur all the time. The gas around Li Anping has completely turned into plasma. Let alone breathing, just throwing a little of these plasma gases onto the Mondo continent is enough to burn down an entire city. At this moment, Li Anping even had the illusion that he was at the center of perseverance. Although Dionysus did not understand the physical knowledge summarized on the earth before, he has gained insights into nature and the universe countless times. But it allows him to reproduce various manifestations in the universe with his experience and proficiency. The same is true for the sun in front of him. It was the ultimate magic that he could only create after observing the sun countless times. But even in this environment that could make all 5th level ability users and magicians despair, Li Anping was still unscathed, and the situation within 1 meter around him was even calmer. It even maintains the state of the universe at more than 200 degrees below zero. It's still magic that simulates natural phenomena. Li Anping's eyes seemed to flash with countless formulas and numbers, looking for traces of Dionysus. As for the attacks around him, although they were amazing, he didn't take them to heart at all. At his level, the natural environment around him has completely become his domain and is at his disposal. In some planes, this may be called the divine domain. As long as he wants, he can always maintain a vacuum state of more than 200 degrees below zero around him, and it will not change at all due to changes in the environment by Dionysus. Therefore, attacks that simply simulate those natural phenomena will have no effect on him. Even if Dionysus enhanced the wind blades and flames to the cosmic storm and sun. While Li Anping was searching for the other party's trace, he murmured, "Where are you? My little dessert." The next moment, a cold light flashed in his eyes, and his arms completely disappeared in the next moment, turning into endless light. The dazzling light was like countless sharp swords, as if it wanted to completely pierce the fireball formed by the entire cosmic storm. Countless tongues of fire emerged from the fireball, as if the entire fireball storm was about to collapse in the next moment. While Li Anping himself launched this attack, he rushed out like lightning, piercing through a nearly vacuum corridor in this little sun. When he stopped, he slowly closed his mouth. At the same time, a white gas at the corner of his mouth struggled like the tail of some animal, but in the end he still took a deep breath and swallowed it completely into his throat. What an interesting body, wonderful, full of the mysteries of life. This elemental magic is much more important than the flashy techniques you have studied. It's a pity that you don't understand it at all. When Li Anping said this, Dionysus only saw him eat part of his body again. The flames of anger filled his mind, and the firestorm he transformed into roared again. He didn't understand how Li Anping's arms turned into light to attack, nor did he know why he could accurately find his own form and eat himself. But now if he was still in human form, he knew that he might have burst blood vessels with anger. How long has it been since he became the strongest in Mondo continent? How long has it been since he felt this way? Those wizards who are high and mighty in the eyes of mortals are not much better than ants in his eyes. This feeling of boiling blood after being humiliated, this feeling of slight fear in the heart after the heart contraction, he has not felt it for too long. The firestorm as big as an asteroid shook and began a strange change. Originally, Dionysus created a total of 9 magics based on his own understanding of the universe and nature. He called them the 9 laws of creation, and the ones he used above were storm and sun from the 9 laws of creation. Any one of the 9 laws of creation is powerful enough to destroy the entire human world. After creating them, for a long time, Dionysus thought that he had reached the pinnacle of magic, the pinnacle of the universe, and could no longer move forward. He stopped studying magic for a period of time and thought that there was no way forward. From the names he gave to the magic he created for himself, the word creation shows how high he positioned himself and his magic. Until he got the information about science and technology from Shang-Tian, that is, Adam. He felt surprised, excited, and happy that magic had a direction to move forward. Then, based on the physical and astronomical parts, he deduced the 10th law of the 9 laws of creation. It was also a natural phenomenon that he had never thought of by observing and summarizing it by himself. Something he had never thought of, something completely beyond his imagination and experience. The ultimate celestial body in the universe, which even Dionysus himself had not really observed, a celestial body that existed in his imagination only after learning about the Earth. Black hole. The entire huge fireball began to collapse, and the infinite power made it shrink inward continuously. The length of tens of thousands of meters was getting smaller and smaller, and the temperature was dropping rapidly. The bright light was gradually extinguished, and the surrounding void became dim again. It seemed that it wanted to absorb everything around it. Even when Li Anping attacked again, the light transformed by his hands began to distort. Oh, seeing the changes in front of him, Li Anping's eyes flashed with surprise, and he had guessed the other party's thoughts. According to his calculations, although this artificial celestial body that was about to be born could not be called a real black hole, the gravity it generated was enough to change the orbit of the magic star. Once it was generated without limit, it might even lead to the extinction of the creatures on the entire magic star. Although he looked down on Dionysus's magic method just now, Li Anping had to admit that in terms of pure strength, he had surpassed him. At least he could never create an artificial celestial body of this strength. It seems that it is not so easy to eat a few more bites. Li Anping's arm slowly dissipated again, turning into omnipresent light. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiong Go. Chapter 403. Light, the ubiquitous light pierced the darkness. In Dionysus's black hole, Li Anping used his light speed punch to open up a new world. No matter how the huge fireball collapsed and shrank, it was difficult to truly complete the collapse of the black hole under the bombardment of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and millions of times per second. The speed of light, this should be the speed limit in the universe, which is an extreme value that humans can never reach with their own bodies. Even in the magic of Mondo continent, there is no way to turn one's own elements into light. So Dionysus was amazed at Li Anping's light speed punch. That's the speed of light. No matter what object, even a speck of dust, wants to accelerate it to the speed of light, the energy required is infinite. This kind of punch that reaches the speed of light, each punch is equivalent to letting the entire East continent enjoy a magnitude 12 earthquake. The shock wave caused by each punch is enough to flatten the entire bayou, and the shock of each punch is enough to set off a tsunami of destruction that engulfs the entire human world. And now, such fists appear at a frequency of tens of thousands per second, piercing endless light around. How is it possible? How did he do it? Under the endless light speed fists, Dionysus's black hole magic had no way to complete, and even showed signs of gradually disintegrating. But compared with the current situation of black hole magic, Dionysus was more concerned about the light speed fist used by Li Anping, and how long it could be used like this. If the few times before could still be said that the light speed fist was a great burden for Li Anping, then Dionysus looked at Li Anping, who had almost become a sun-like light ball, and it was clear that he could use the light speed fist at will without any side effects. The next moment, a ray of light like a supernova explosion instantly enveloped the entire artificial celestial body, and the light speed fists that exceeded hundreds of millions of times per second directly pierced the entire artificial celestial body into countless fragments. Under the control of Dionysus, the entire celestial body once again turned into an omnipresent hurricane, forming a huge head of more than 10,000 meters. Li Anping was enveloped, and the head looked like Dionysus. He looked like he could swallow a planet in a few bites at any time and anywhere. The atmosphere of the entire storm body resonated, making a thunderous roar. Li Anping, your light speed punch is powerful, but it is impossible to really defeat me. Li Anping looked at the cosmic storm in front of him coldly. He said lightly, "Don't you understand? What do these hands represent?" As Li Anping said this, not only his hands, but also his feet, torso, and chest began to change. It was like a distorted ball of light. Aren't you asking me about the nature of the universe? Then do you know that the history of the universe can be determined after it actually happens? What is the process is only related to our observation method, and has nothing to do with our observation time. What Li Anping said was the conclusion obtained from the famous delay experiment. He proved that any basic quantum phenomenon is only a phenomenon after it is recorded. It makes no difference in quantum experiments whether we make a decision before or during the photon's journey. History is not certain and real unless it has been observed and recorded. Nonsense, everything has a cause before it has an effect. How can the cause appear after the effect? Dionysus had also seen this bizarre theory in books on Earth, but he did not believe in this experiment at all. This was inconsistent with his actual experience. Li Anping ignored Dionysus's rebuttal and directly stretched out his palm. When his palm was spread out, a white airflow appeared in his palm again. Li Anping opened his mouth and sucked him into his mouth. How is it possible? Before Dionysus shouted this sentence, the white light had pierced through a place where the gasified body was hidden in the storm. What made him even more terrified was that the position where this light pierced was exactly the part of his body that he had just lost, which inexplicably appeared in Li Anping's palm and was eaten by him. If Li Anping's ability to accurately find his body in such a huge cosmic storm only surprised him, then the scene in front of him made him feel terrified. The next moment, Li Anping's voice sounded again, like a death knell, giving Dionysus a shuddering feeling. Although the universe has evolved for billions of years, it was not until an intelligent creature actually observed it that it became certain. Our observation itself has become part of the creation of the universe. Before the observer observed, the constants of the entire universe were a series of uncertain superpositions. They became certain after the observer observed them. Only when these constants are precisely kept within a certain range can a good environment be created for the observer to survive and continue to observe the universe. The existence of consciousness, in turn, has created its history. Li Anping's words were like magic sounds filling his brain. After listening to his theory, Dionysus felt his head buzzing. The weirdness of this theory made his brain seem to explode, but Li Anping's personal demonstration made it seem to make sense. At this moment, Li Anping's hands had turned into countless rays of light and pierced the cosmic storm again. The reason why my hands can reach the speed of light is because they have turned into light. In the entire universe, only light itself can reach the speed of light. Of course, if a portal is opened at both ends of the universe, the moment a person passes through the portal, he will travel faster than the speed of light, but this is actually not true superluminal travel. Just as the light emanating from Li Anping's body became more and more, as if countless spears pierced Dionysus' brain, the words he said also made the other party's psychological acceptance reach its limit. The true appearance of all matter is only related to our means of observation. The world in the eyes of humans, the world in the eyes of animals, the world in the eyes of insects, and the world in the eyes of microorganisms are all different. Light, time, and space appear differently in their eyes, but each of them sees the real world, but their means of observation are different. What the world and the universe are like is only related to the difference in the observer. What cannot be observed is meaningless. The next moment, the pure light turned into countless thorns and stabbed at various parts of Dionysus' body. At this moment, Li Anping's hands were no longer hands, but turned into real light. These lights themselves have no consciousness, but are just the superposition of countless probability wave functions. They have become countless waves, running with the unique algorithm designed by Li Anping. When they reach the target, they will observe themselves again and turn into particles to penetrate the target again. And every time Li Anping punches, a white airflow has been sucked into his mouth. As he swallows more and more airflow, the light of his fists will become more and more intense and more dazzling. Dionysus was exhausted from resisting Li Anping's attack. The composition of the celestial body changed from storm to earth, and from earth to sea, followed by force field, lightning, and metal, but it was all meaningless. Li Anping's attack was like light, omnipresent, and any material was directly penetrated and torn apart. As his body was eaten by the opponent, Dionysus's fear was constantly magnified. Finally, he screamed, his body had been reassembled, and after performing time stillness, he opened a portal, and then cast hundreds of 10th level magics directed at Li Anping. After the time stillness ended, he entered the portal and disappeared. Only his voice still echoed in this space. Li Anping, this exchange has benefited me a lot. Next time, I will repay you well. Dionysus, who walked out of the portal, was full of the previous attack and the theory that Li Anping said. They were like millions of bombs, destroying his worldview, outlook on life, and values. Li Anping still stayed in the universe, his eyes were closed, as if he was in a state of meditation, and he did not express any opinion on Dionysus's escape. The white airflow was still flowing in his body, and was not directly absorbed by him, but was constantly analyzed by his brain. After a long time, maybe a few days, maybe a few hours, his eyes slowly opened, and a hint of enlightenment was revealed in his eyes. The omnipresent light had already covered his entire body, and even began to slowly spread to his head. During the time when Li Anping was communicating with Dionysus, the battle on the Mondo continent had intensified. After the Saint Laurent Magic Guild branch was attacked by an explosion, a prophet immediately came to calculate who was responsible for this terrible attack. When the image of Jingguang and Lu Feng appeared in front of them, the royal family of the Saint Laurent Empire was furious and directly dispatched 18 magicians from all over the country to pursue them. The headquarters of the Mage Guild even issued a comprehensive wanted order. As long as the evil demons could be captured, the Mage Guild would meet any request. Under the pressure of Adam, the other 4 empires also sent troops to attack the Alama Basin, vowing to attack the gate of hell and kill all the evil demons. This was a joint effort of the 5 empires and the Magic Guild under the pressure of Dionysus, and it was also a huge military operation that had not appeared in the Mondo continent for hundreds of years. There were more than 100 magicians in total, 5 magic marshals, and Adam, the son of a demigod. Such a huge force made people all over the Mondo continent believe that it was only a matter of time to wipe out the evil demons and occupy the gate of hell. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiong Go. Chapter 404. Late at night. The white moonlight shone on the Umla Basin. Fang Heja in the camp looked up. The moon here was very similar to that on the earth, but it was already a completely different world. When Yan Bei, Lu Feng, and Jingguang went to investigate the intelligence of the magic star on the spot, Fang Heja was selected to stay in the camp due to his lack of experience and was also responsible for some collection and investigation work in the Umla Basin. Compared to the dangers of Jingguang, Yan Bei, and others, Fang Heja lived a very leisurely life. However, the situation also changed starting from the 4th day, that is, he found that he suddenly lost contact with the earth. The magic star's gate to the White Land is blocked by an invisible barrier. He did not know that this was the entrance to the demi-plane created by Dionysus. Unless he takes the initiative to remove it, or the entrance is destroyed, no one can enter the White Land from the magic world. And those who enter the magic star from the White Land will also be directly transferred to his demi-plane. Faced with this calm and strange situation, the only thing Fang Heji could do was to stay in the camp and complete the previous mission. However, he had already made a plan in his mind. After a month, if he still couldn't contact anyone and Jingguang and Yanbei didn't send anyone to find them, he planned to leave the camp and look for traces of his teammates. Today was already the 7th day of his waiting, and none of the team members who were supposed to have returned as promised were nowhere to be seen. As for the Earth, there is still no contact. In the past few days, Fang Heji has also tried many methods, trying to pass through the invisible barrier in front of the boundary crossing gate. But regardless of his virtualization ability, neither the red lightning, lightsaber, or the weapons equipped in the nano armor can do anything against that invisible barrier. By the fire. Just when Fang Heji saw the moon in the sky and thought about what to do, he suddenly heard the sound of Zixi swishing in his ears. He calmly reached out his hand to the laminar arc plasma sword at his waist, and gently placed his finger on the switch of the lightsaber. At the same time, the mental energy in his body shot out in all directions, scanning an area of 500 meters around him like a radar. 1, 2, 3. Fang Heji thought quietly in his heart. In Nian Qi's perception, there were 3 adult men slowly approaching him from his left, right, and behind, and the 2 on the left and right were very close. The one directly behind me is almost 100 meters away. On the other side, the magic apprentice Wei Lun in the grass was using the wind communication technique to say to the 2 servant swordsmen, "Slowly approach, don't let him find out, remember to take action after I release the magic. Once these evil spirits enter the fighting state after that, their scales will wrap around their heads. Ordinary attacks will not be able to cut through their scales, so their heads must be cut off before then." Wei Lun saw 2 family swordsmen nodding to him in the darkness. He blessed himself with the eagle eye technique again and looked at Fang Heji beside the fire. I reviewed the information about the silver demons again in my mind to make sure there were no mistakes. After entering the fighting state, their whole bodies will be wrapped in silver. Their scales are very tough, and ordinary swords, guns, fire, and ice are difficult to use. But they seem to be more afraid of electric current. A powerful enough electric shock can paralyze them for a short time. Their eyes are strong enough to see through the darkness. Smoke and invisibility are useless against them. They have to be approached quietly from behind. Sometimes they disappear suddenly, but don't be nervous. They don't really disappear, it's just that the light passes through their bodies. At this time, dust and water are the best choices. The information about the silver demon flowed through Wei Lun's heart word by word. He clenched his fists nervously, and the magic element slowly transferred from the void to his fingertips. The next moment, the lightning flashed, and a dazzling electric snake pierced the air like a bolt of lightning and shot towards Fang Heji's location. The moment the magic came out, Wei Lun didn't care about hiding it anymore and roared, "Do it!" But as soon as the 2 swordsmen rushed out, they saw an incredible scene. The silver demon sitting next to the fire seemed to have turned into a faint shadow. The bright electric light directly penetrated his body, directly hitting a scorch mark on the ground, but the silver demon himself stood up unscathed. Just when the 2 of them were stunned, not knowing whether to continue attacking, Fang Heji had once again completed the transformation from virtual body to entity. At the same time, his fingers gently pressed on the switch of the laminar arc plasma sword. The light blade extended directly to 5 meters away, and gently rotated around Fang Heji's body. It was like a white moon rising on the ground. As for the 2 swordsmen touched by this moon, their bodies were swept by the light blade with a temperature exceeding 20,000 degrees, and they were directly broken into 2 pieces and fell towards the ground. Fang Heji put away his lightsaber, turned around and looked at Wei Lun's position. Then he took a step forward, and his body turned from solid to virtual again. Driven by inertia, he passed through countless obstacles and flew quickly towards the opponent's location. Wei Lun screamed in surprise when he saw the silver demon charging towards him. But the long-term training finally did not make him lose his mind and run away. With just a tap of his fingertips, 8 electric arrows were fired at the oncoming Fanghaja. But this attack had no effect on Fanghaja, who was in a virtual state. It directly penetrated his body and broke several trees. Fanghaja had already come to Wei Lun's front, and his body changed from virtual to real again, and he directly slapped Wei Lun's shoulder with one hand. The electric shock was emitted by the gloves made of nano armor, creating an effect like an electric shock gun. Wei Lun fell down stiffly. This electric shock effect will cause adults to be paralyzed within 10 minutes, without any resistance, and is specially designed to capture the target alive. Fanghaja's purpose of doing this was also to capture the other party alive and ask about the current situation of Mondo continent. But just as he lifted Wei Lun from the ground, 2 sounds of breaking through the air came into his ears again. He turned around with a vigilant look on his face, and the laminar arc plasma sword on his waist had already brought up a conventional light blade of more than 2 meters, sweeping towards his back like a conditioned reflex. "Don't be nervous, it's us." Behind Fanghaja, Tony's right hand, which had turned pitch black, was blocking Fanghaja's lightsaber in his palm. The high temperature of 20,000 degrees was like an ordinary fluorescent stick, and could not hurt his pitch black right hand at all. This was his bloodline ability, the absolute black domain. Behind him, Ivan was standing aside with the pale Brian on his back. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xianglang Guo. Chapter 405. You are finally back. Fanghaja turned his head and looked around, then said, "Where are the others?" Suddenly his eyes turned to Brian's broken arm and asked, "Were you attacked?" Tony shook his head, "We'll talk about it later. Let's go to the boundary gate first. We have important information to report to His Majesty." Hearing what Tony said, Fanghaja smiled bitterly and said, "The boundary crossing gate is blocked. It's impossible to pass." A few minutes later, Ivan punched and kicked the blue boundary gate. But no matter how hard he tried, his hands and feet were blocked by a thin film that was imperceptible to the naked eye. Another punch hit the film, and Ivan said bitterly, "Damn it, what on earth is going on? Is it those magicians who did it again?" Brian sat on the ground beside him and said with a pale face, "Who knows, those magicians have endless tricks. Judging from their behavior of chasing us along the way, they knew our existence in advance. Even if the crossing is blocked now, there's nothing weird about the door." Fanghaja on the other side also looked very ugly. He learned about the current situation of the expedition team from Ivan's mouth, which made him very worried. At this moment, Tony walked out of the woods nearby. There were still mottled blood stains on his hands, which belonged to the magic apprentice Wei Lun. It was obvious that he had just been tortured in the woods. Tony said to Fanghaja and the other 3, "Bad news, guys. According to the intelligence from that survivor, Jingguang and the others seem to have placed a tactical nuclear bomb in the other party's hometown." Ivan laughed first. "I like this information." He raised his right arm and wanted to give Brian a high five, but the latter just looked at him coldly, and Ivan put down his hand in embarrassment. Brian said with a gloomy look, "What they did is just like poking a hornet's nest." Tony smiled bitterly, shrugged and said, "You are right. According to the mage apprentice, the 5 empires have assembled 1,000,000 troops. There are 5 magic marshals leading each, heading towards the Amara Basin. The direction is coming." Brian said, "With their productivity, it will take at least 3 months to gather 1,000,000 troops to get here. Don't forget they have magic." Tony continued while washing the blood on his hands. "They can quickly gather a large army through teleportation magic, and these ordinary soldiers can only be regarded as cannon fodder. The real trouble, it's the magicians and other mages who have caught wind of this and want to get a share of it. People die for money and birds die for food. You see, even a magic apprentice dares to come here. Ivan shouted, "What should we do? We can't sit still and wait for death." Brian shook his head and said, "You can't sit still and wait for death, but we are not without any resistance." Yanbei and Jingguang should also have heard the news. They may rush over at any time. The Earth side should also be thinking of ways to get through. Crossing the realm gate, if His Majesty is here, I think it is only a matter of time. Brian touched the wound on his broken arm, and then said, "We can do our best and use the weapons here in the camp to delay the coalition forces' time a little. If the boundary gate has not been opened." Tony immediately responded, "Then withdraw. If this happens, the situation of this battle will be beyond our control." 5 sharp claws stretched out from Ivan's palm, and they collided with each other and made a scratching sound. "I like this idea. What should we do next?" After Ivan said this, the remaining 3 people all looked at Tony. After a year of training by Li Anping, Tony has been in charge of family affairs for a long time, and every move he makes shows the demeanor of a leader. In addition, everyone knows that he was possessed by Li Anping and has this hidden identity. Let him become the leader of this temporary team. Tony thought for a while and then said to Fang Heja, "Fang, you are the most familiar with this place. Come with me to set up defenses." Then he turned to look at Brian and Ivan. "Brian, take a rest here. By the way, help us guard the camp. Ivan, patrol around the Amara basin and clean up all the debris." "I understand." Ivan said this at the same time. The whole body swelled up. Gray hair sprouted from his body. His nose bone slowly grew longer, his ears slowly stood up, and he turned into a giant wolf that walked upright. The nano armor continued to adjust as his body shape changed, and finally still covered his entire body. A sinister smile appeared on the wolf's mouth, and Ivan's teeth collided like 2 knives, knocking up and down. "Don't worry, I will turn them all into fertilizer in the forest." At the same time as he said this, Ivan had already entered a state of invisibility under the influence of optical camouflage, transformed into a ghost wolf, and threw himself into the woods of the Umla Basin. After seeing Ivan leaving, Tony nodded towards Brian, "You have a good rest, and if you have anything, tell us through the nano armor's communication channel." Although the satellite has been destroyed, the communication channels of the nano armor can still interact with each other within a few kilometers. With that said, Fang Heja and Tony were already walking towards the warehouse of the camp. They were going to use the weapons stored here to set up a circle of defenses in the woods of the Umla Basin. Just as Tony and the other 4 were setting up defenses, they walked through the other side of the boundary gate. Bai Xing, Emma, and the doctor have all arrived at the White Land. Seeing Emma and the doctor busy in front of the portal leading to the magic star, Bai Xing bowed and said to the avatar of mind beside him, "Your Majesty, what's the situation over there? The portal set up by the other party is very complicated. Even Emma and the doctor may need more than 12 hours to destroy it." The avatar of mind said, "It doesn't matter. My real body can't come here for the time being. You should gather the army first. When the portal opens, we may be greeted by a war." "War?" Bai Xing's eyes flashed with a strange color, and he lowered his head and retreated. When he rushed back to Earth, an expeditionary force targeting the magic world had begun to gather. The virtual number agency, the Great Xia Dragon Bird, the upper-level ability users of human armed forces, plus the elite special forces wearing nano armor, and a group of fully armed armored troops slowly entered the underwater base and came to the White Land through the portal over there. Currently, there are more than 6 level 5 ability users who have come to the White Land. The nano warriors and armored troops total 20,000 people. A solemn atmosphere before the war is slowly spreading among the soldiers. In the woods, 7 adventurers are sitting around a bonfire. 3 magicians, 2 swordsmen, a hunter, and a beautiful woman with pointed ears, a beautiful face, and a longbow on her back. There was a crackling sound in the fire, and the hunter stretched and rubbed his eyes tiredly. As a hunter on the border of the Saint Laurent Empire, if these adventurers in front of him had not given him enough gold coins, he would never be willing to come to a barren land like the Amara Basin. The oldest middle-aged man among the magicians asked, "Is this already the Amara Basin?" The hunter sat up straight immediately after hearing this. He answered respectfully, "This is already the periphery of the basin. According to our speed during this period, we should be able to reach our destination before noon tomorrow." Another magician who looked to be in his 20s and had freckles on his face frowned and said, "Why haven't we encountered a silver demon so far? Didn't they all come out of the Hell Gate in the Amara Basin?" The hunter said awkwardly, "I don't know much. I grew up on the border of the empire, and I only know now that there are silver demons in the Amara Basin." A young woman with a bow and arrow on her back said, "I heard that the Hell Gate was opened recently, and those evil demons didn't come out in large numbers." Speaking of this, her eyes were full of light. "I heard that the coalition forces have been dispatched. If we can catch a few silver demons before they arrive, then we can also have the opportunity to let Mr. Half-Body solidify the magic for us personally." Hearing the woman's voice, the two young mages stared at the girl's face, as if they wanted to eat each other alive. "Don't worry, Miss Alice. We will definitely help you catch a silver demon. Yes, Senior Chiao Wei has become a high-ranking wizard. As long as we encounter those silver demons, we will definitely catch them." The middle-aged wizard Chiao Wei sighed secretly, feeling a little funny in his heart. His two junior brothers were still too young and still had admiration for mortal women in their hearts. Although Alice in front of him was indeed beautiful and a hybrid of human and elf, in the final analysis, she was just a mortal. Chiao Wei looked only middle-aged, but his actual age was over 100 years old. Looking at the two junior brothers beside him, it was like seeing himself when he was young. They studied magic for too short a time and were too young. Only when they saw those mortals grow old and die in front of them again and again, could they notice the gap between themselves and these mortals. As long as magic is eternal, Chiao Wei is willing to help his two junior brothers realize this. It doesn't matter even if it takes 5 or 10 years. Time can hardly leave traces on a magician, but it can turn a young girl into an old woman with wrinkles on her face. The two swordsmen on the side were silent from beginning to end. Compared with the dignity of magicians, swordsmen were just the most helpless choice for civilians who had no magic talent but wanted to stand out. They knew the gap between themselves and the magicians, so when the two young magicians showed their admiration for Alice, they never took the initiative to say a word to Alice again. At this moment, a swordsman suddenly stood up and said, "I seem to hear some sound." A young wizard said unhappily, "What sound?" The warning magic didn't react. "It must be some small animal. Be careful. Even I am no match for the strong ones among the silver demons. Once there is danger, you should be ready to enter the portal I opened at any time." The middle-aged wizard Chiao Wei also stood up and continued, "And I only set up the magic of humanoid detection. Other kinds of ferocious animals may appear in this basin." As Chiao Wei finished speaking, a large animal detection magic was released from his fingertips again. But the moment the magic was released, his face changed. As his body turned back, Ivan's bloody mouth had already bitten towards his head. In the eyes of the crowd, they could only see that Jovi's head was covered by a layer of transparent material, as if he had become a headless corpse. The two swordsmen roared and rushed over, while the two young mages began to cast magic while chanting. Alice drew her bow and arrow, aiming at the place where Jovi's head disappeared. In their imagination, Jovi, as a high-level mage, could never be killed in a short time with just his protective force field. But Ivan didn't think so. In his mouth, rows of sharp teeth modified with nano armor suddenly vibrated. Tens of thousands of high-speed vibrations per second, just like a dozen high-frequency swords. His palates closed lightly, and the protective force field was broken in an instant, and Jovi's head had been swallowed whole by him. Blood sprayed out from the wound, dyeing a huge wolf head red, and it emerged in the air. Being splashed with blood, Ivan simply removed the optical camouflage. The huge wolf body of more than 5 meters was immediately revealed, full of a huge sense of oppression. The two swordsmen were torn into countless pieces of meat by his sharp claws before they even approached. The two young mages who were supposed to bless the swordsmen with magic, after seeing Chiao Wei being killed so easily, one of them stood there trembling and at a loss, and the other turned around and ran away like the hunter and Alice. Ivan's wolf mouth showed a hint of a sly smile, and the next moment he got on all fours and chased the fleeing magician like a wild wolf in the forest. A black shadow flashed by, and the mage who stood there stupidly had his neck torn off by the wolf claws covered with super alloy before he could react. On the other side, Alice ran towards the depths of the jungle in a panic. Although she had no magic talent, her elf blood gave her agile skills and quick reactions. But when she heard two screams coming from behind her, her heart was already shrouded in the fear of death. Hearing the sound of the giant wolf chasing her, she ran faster and faster, but accidentally tripped over a branch and fell to the ground. When she got up and wanted to continue running, a stream of hot air mixed with fishy wind came from behind her head. A violent gasp sounded in her ears. She felt a huge wolf claw slowly pressing on her head. Alice didn't dare to move. She opened her mouth to beg for mercy, but she didn't know what to say. Just as she was panicking, a sharp wolf claw had pierced her skull and crushed her brain. To be continued. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Seong Lang-go. Chapter 406. Early in the morning, on a plain 10 miles away from the Amara Basin. Hundreds of huge portals were opened, and countless soldiers and wizards emerged from the portals like ants. They were like the cold weapon army of the Middle Ages, holding swords and guns, wearing armor, and exuding a sense of wildness. But their subsequent behavior was completely different from that of the ancient army. Under the joint spells of countless magicians, rows of huge earth walls several kilometers long and more than 10 meters high rose up. That was the temporary camp of the coalition forces. After the transformation of magic, there was no problem for millions of troops to live in it. Moreover, after the solidification of magic, the defense of these earth walls was comparable to steel, and even bombs might not be able to blow them open. And there was one biggest difference between this coalition and ordinary ancient armies. He said 1 million, and it really was 1 million people. All of these 1 million people were brave and good warriors. After being blessed by magicians with a series of magic such as bear power, leopard speed, steel skin, and perseverance, they were simply a group of war machines. In addition to them, there are dozens of huge steel puppets more than 8 meters high, which are quietly pushed out of the portal. They are war puppets made by magicians who are good at alchemy. This time, they were also sent here because of the emergency conscription of the Magic Guild. More than 1 million troops do not need any logistics around them, nor do they need any supplies, because hundreds of portals are right next to them, and countless servants will come out of the portals at any time to distribute food to them. Take care of weapons and armor. Even captain-level soldiers will be distributed to magic devices made by mages, which have more powerful power. And these millions of troops, all are commanded by the magician's mental magic layer by layer, making the entire military camp, although huge, like a huge ant nest, appearing well organized and without the slightest chaos. In the center of the huge military camp on this plain, another 5-meter high portal rose up, and countless warriors in golden armor came out of it, which immediately caused an exclamation among the soldiers around. That is the trump card of the Saint Laurent Empire. The Golden Guards. Each of them is an ultimate warrior who has experienced hundreds of battles and is fearless of death. After undergoing magic surgery, their combat effectiveness has increased significantly again. Each Golden Guard has 2 hearts, and all the bones are infused with mithril, and countless regeneration and defense magic spells are engraved on them. These spells can not only make them have steel-like skin and spider-like sensitive touch at all times. Even when they are seriously injured and dying, they can maintain most of their physiological functions to continue to maintain their combat capabilities for more than a day and a night. And on their epidermis, thousands of magic arrays connected in circles are engraved with dragon blood. Even if they have no magic talent, they can cast magic of level 1 to 3 through these magic arrays. Even through the cooperation of 3 to 10 people, they can cast powerful magic of level 4 to 6. At the same time, these magic arrays can also enhance their magic adaptability, making the buff magic bestowed on them by the mages of the same camp have a more powerful effect. If the Golden Guards only surprised the surrounding soldiers, then the person who came out of the portal next made all the surrounding soldiers cheer. It was a man in a black robe, with gold-edged patterns on his robe and clothes. The golden six-pointed star on his chest symbolized his identity. The King of Wizards, the wizard with the strongest combat power in a country. The Magic Marshal. And he appeared with the Golden Guards of the Saint Laurent Empire, and it was naturally the Magic Marshal of the Saint Laurent Empire, von SpecialAbilities. But just after the appearance of the Magic Marshal SpecialAbilities, 4 black-robed gold-edged magicians came out of the portal again. It turned out that the magic marshals of the other 4 empires appeared at the same time. Although the action of the coalition this time was said to be jointly led by the 5 marshals, according to past habits, it was never really seen on the battlefield more than 2 magic marshals, and now the battle has not started yet, the 5 magic marshals have gathered in advance and walked out of the portal together. It's incredible. Do we need to take the demons so seriously this time? Of course, I heard that the demons have the power of wizards. Once they all escape from the gate of hell, they will overturn the entire Mondo continent. The leader SpecialAbilities looked at the huge earth wall more than 10 meters high in the distance, turned his head and said to an old man, "Isa, please." "It's just a piece of cake." The speaker was a middle-aged man wearing a monocle and having a very good appearance. Magicians can use various magic and materials to fix their appearance forever, but because of their different temperaments, their fixed appearance may not all be young and beautiful. This elegant old man in front of him is obviously the case. As he spoke, his right foot had already gently kicked the ground under his feet a few times. The next moment, the entire earth shook, and under the reverent gazes of the surrounding soldiers, a huge stone pillar made entirely of mud and stones, with a diameter of more than 10 meters, shot up into the sky, sending all 5 magic marshals high into the sky, until it gradually stopped at a height of more than 150 meters. SpecialAbilities walked to the edge of the stone pillar and looked at the Umla basin 10 miles away. With his current height, combined with the far-sighted magic, he could see most of the Umla basin. He murmured, "I heard from the outpost troops that silver demons have appeared in the woods of the basin. Those guys have killed many scattered adventurers, mages, and scouts." Next to SpecialAbilities was a young woman with dark skin and long hair. The gold-rimmed black robe on her body had been specially modified. Not only did it not cover her body, but instead exposed most of her round breasts, and a pair of slender and straight legs. The wheat-colored thighs look extremely sexy. But the 5 people present are all old monsters who have lived for hundreds of years. Things like beauty are no longer what they pay most attention to. Compared with the woman's appearance, the other person's identity and the words she said are more arousing. Their attention. Lord Adam hasn't come yet. According to him, he and the demigod will hide in the dark in order to deal with the demon king. The woman murmured, "SpecialAbilities, I heard that you caught a silver demons. Let's talk about what kind of creatures they are. I've never seen such a thing before." SpecialAbilities frowned and said, "He was blown to pieces before I could see it. But there is one piece of their skin, which I still keep." As he spoke, SpecialAbilities had already taken out a piece of nano armor that had been peeled off Lauren's body from the space bag. The young woman is Michelle, who is also the Grand Marshal of the Five Demons. Michel took the nano-armor handed over by SpecialAbilities and released various magic rays in his eyes, scanning the silver-white nano-armor in front of him. Strange fur, I feel like this fur is still alive. SpecialAbilities was non-committal about this, and just added, their fur or scales are stronger than the dragon's skin, and they also have the ability to refract light, which allows them to enter a state of invisibility at will. According to the magicians on the front line, invulnerability, immense strength, and the ability to become invisible are abilities that every silver demon possesses. As everyone knows, they also have a method that is still unknown to us, which can cause large-scale explosions and curses. Even the level of magicians must be careful about this. Just as SpecialAbilities was saying this, a childlike sorcerer marshal stood up from the side. He looked like a cute 10-year-old boy, but the sound coming from his throat, the voice was like that of an old man over 100 years old. It's so troublesome. They're just a bunch of beasts that don't even know magic. Are you worth making a fuss about? As he said these words, powerful magic power surged from his body. Just let me finish them off once and for all. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Lang. Chapter 407. The person who spoke was none other than Narcissus, one of the five magic marshals. He pointed to the Amara basin in front of him and said, "Let me come and say hello to them first." He waved his hand, and countless fire clouds were generated in the sky. Half a minute later, hundreds of huge bolides fell from the sky. Each bolide was the size of a truck, with layers of magma spreading on it. Just like the Doomsday Judgment, falling towards the Umla basin in front of you. Every meteorite hitting the earth will cause a tremor. The scattered rocks and magma are like a rain of death, completely killing all life nearby. Under the attack of high temperature, more than one-third of the Umla basin's flames began to raging, burning, towards the remaining woods. If nothing else goes wrong, in a few hours, the entire forest in the Amara basin will turn into scorched earth. When they saw the sorcerer marshal taking action, meteors and fire rained down from the sky and easily turned the entire Amara basin into a scorched earth. All the millions of soldiers cheered. Everyone is sincerely proud of the power of the magic marshal on their side. The roars of millions of people almost shook the clouds in the sky, but the five magic marshals had no reaction to these sounds. But Michel frowned and said, "Now the entire basin is on fire. How do our people get in?" "You still want to send people in," Narcissus said disdainfully. "My improved version of the meteor shower can melt even steel. Those silver demons have probably been burned long ago. Let's wait until the fire is out before going to hell. That's the door." Not necessarily. After hearing what Narcissus said, SpecialAbilities shook his head and said, "These silver demons are highly resistant to high temperatures and flames. Your fire may not be able to burn them all to death." At this moment, a series of explosions suddenly occurred in the Amara basin. They were high explosive mines that Tony and Fanghaja had previously deployed in the woods. But now it exploded on its own in the shower of meteors and fire. Narcissus wondered, what happened to this explosion? My meteor shower should not have this function, and I did not feel the magic fluctuations. Is there something in the basin? SpecialAbilities explained, it's the method of those silver demons. They seem to be able to create explosions without using magic. Raven's big explosion also has no magic fluctuations. Anyway, all the silver demons inside are not dead yet. Michelle flipped up her hair and said, "Then let me put out the fire, so that the army can attack in a while." As she was speaking, huge magic power had already poured out of her body, and the ubiquitous vacuum zero-point energy in the void, which was what magicians called magic elements, gathered in the sky. After a series of reactions, it turned into a large dark cloud and appeared over the entire Umla basin. The next moment, there was only a sound of thunder, and a heavy downpour fell from the sky, pouring towards the magma, meteorites, and flames in the Umla basin. This is no longer just about putting out fires. The water droplets falling from the sky turned into water vapor with a temperature of hundreds of degrees before reaching the ground. Countless white water vapor instantly filled the entire Umla basin. The lethality of this water vapor is even greater than that of the previous fire. If magma and flames are relatively easy to resist because they can be seen and touched, these white water vapors are pervasive and will sterilize them, sweeping the entire Amalur basin aside, killing every creature in it. When the fire clouds in the sky began to gather, Tony, Fanghaja, Ivan and Brian, who were hiding in the woods, all realized something was wrong. Tony was just looking at the huge stone pillars that suddenly shot up into the sky in the opponent's camp. Now looking up at the fire clouds gathering above his head, he recalled the magic materials he had read during the previous training, and his expression changed. Already yelling at the communication channel in the nano armor, "It's magic, it's meteors and fire showers, everyone should pay attention to dodge." However, the scope of the meteor shower in front of us was too wide, covering almost half of the Amara basin, and the attack range far exceeded the introduction in the magic materials. Could this kind of power be that of a magic marshal? Tony, Ivan, and others were hunted down by those mages before. It was not that they had never encountered magicians before, but when they met those magicians, they had not yet. As soon as they took action, the golden light killed the opponent in 3 strokes, so although they always knew that the magician was very powerful, and in some aspects even stronger than the 5th level ability user, they never really took it to heart. But now the opponent's magic marshal struck, and it was already a map level blow. The momentum was huge, and it was even more powerful than many 5th level ability users. Just as Tony was thinking about this, fire rained down from the sky. Tony and the others could not care less about the debris mixed in the meteor shower, but when they looked at the more than 100 meteorites, each one the size of a truck, with billowing lava rising from them, their expressions immediately changed. The opponent is too powerful. Abandon the defenses. Everyone breaks out toward the north. The power of the magic marshal far exceeds the magicians Tony and others have encountered before. The meteors and fire showers in front of them are enough to destroy a town in an instant. If those meteorites the size of trucks are hit head-on, except for Fanghaja who relied on his virtualization ability, everyone else was bound to die. Even with nano armor, there was no guarantee of survival. No one wanted to verify the power of this magic. After hearing Tony's roar from the communication channel, Ivan and others immediately ran to the north, trying to break through. Along the way, the 4 people relied on their agility and the reminders from the nano armor, dodged the meteorites falling from the sky one by one, and finally left the range covered by the magic. Even Ivan, the most arrogant of the 4, had a lingering fear in his eyes. Did the magic marshal do it? The nano armor covering his head and the chip covering his eyes shrank for a while, just like a telescope, allowing him to clearly see the 5 magic marshals on the stone pillar more than 10 miles away. Seeing this, the eyes of the 4 people changed. They didn't expect that the other party would directly let the magic marshal take action, and the power of the magic marshal was far beyond their expectations. Looking at the burning forest hundreds of meters away, and the distorted air. As the magma exploded from the meteorite, Tony said with an unpleasant face, "The gap in strength is too big, let's retreat." The other 4 people also nodded. If the other party had only ordinary soldiers and magicians, they could still defend with the heavy weapons in the warehouse, but the other party now had the power of the magic marshal, which was completely beyond their ability to contend with. Although the 4 of them were somewhat unwilling to hand over the gate, they had no choice. But just as the 4 of them entered the invisible state at the same time and broke through to the edge of the Amara basin, the fire cloud in the sky disappeared. But another large dark cloud covered it. A few seconds later, a heavy rain fell from the sky and landed in the Amara basin. The white water vapor was like some kind of poisonous smoke, quickly covering the entire Amara basin. High temperature alarms kept ringing from the nano armor. These water vapors formed by magma and rain were enough to kill ordinary people in an instant. Although Tony and the others wore nano armor, they could not withstand such high temperatures indefinitely. Moreover, the ubiquitous water vapor would not only threaten their lives, but also expose their already invisible bodies. "Damn it, go." Tony said this. He took a step forward, and the powerful explosive force was amplified again through the exoskeleton joints at the ankles and knees. He was like a sharp sword, piercing the surrounding water vapor. He rushed to the north. On the stone pillar, the 5 magic marshals quietly looked at the Amara basin, which had become a hell of death. If it was an ordinary war, they would have left here and returned to their own laboratories to continue studying magic. But this battle was ordered by Adam, the son of the demigod. Not only did they have to completely eliminate those silver demons, but they also had to seize the gate of hell and lay a frontier battle for the coalition's counterattack on hell. So not only did the 5 people not leave, they were all looking at the battlefield seriously. At this time, although Tony and others made very little noise and were still in a state of invisibility, they were still discovered by the 5 magic marshals. Standing at the top of the Mondo continent, they far surpassed Tony and others in terms of destructive power, insight, survivability and other aspects. Tony and the other 4 in front of them were like mice that had been poured with water in the hole and escaped from the hole. SpecialAbilities said, "The environment in the Amara basin is too bad now, and ordinary troops cannot enter. Let the Golden Guards take action and catch these mice." The other 4 marshals had no objection to Sibelius's arrangement. It was impossible for them to personally take action and go to the Amara basin to catch people. They were magic marshals, responsible for leading the entire coalition. Standing here, casting magic and giving orders would be enough. Asking them to fight those beasts in hand-to-hand combat was simply too self-degrading. Seeing that the other 4 did not speak, SpecialAbilities gave the order directly through the wind signal. The Golden Guards under the stone pillars all raised their heads after receiving the order. Sibelius's sight was directly transmitted to their minds. The terrain and current situation of the entire Amara basin, as well as the positions of Tony and others, were all memorized by them. A bloodthirsty light flashed in the eyes of these magic warriors. The next moment, the Golden Guards divided 500 people, and they stood together in groups of 5, forming 500 teams, casting magic together. Magic elements rose from their feet, and the next moment, the 5 white warriors in golden armor had already soared into the sky, like a jet plane, directly passing through the rain and water vapor that were still colliding with each other in the sky, and rushed towards the position of Tony and the other 5 people. When the 5 white golden guards crossed the sky, a large number of shouts sounded again in the military camp. Before they got close, each of them had already drawn a golden dagger from their backs. When they arrived at the destination, countless detection magics had been cast. Even with the optical camouflage, Tony and the others were already exposed in front of the 500 golden guards. With a bang, the first 5 golden guards rushed directly towards Ivan. Ivan roared, and the whole person had turned into a giant wolf walking upright, and his 2 claws pounced fiercely at the 2 guards. With 2 bangs, the guards who were attacked flew out directly, but unlike the opponents who were broken into pieces in the past, their bodies and bones were much stronger than Ivan expected. He just fell to the ground, shook his head and stood up again. He looked unharmed. In the hands of the other guards, blue electric light emerged from their golden daggers. In order to deal with the silver demon this time, their magic swords were specially enchanted with electric current magic. At first there were 2, then 5, 10, and 20. The golden guards were like indestructible cockroaches. No matter how they were torn and knocked away by their claws, they could not be killed. They rushed towards Ivan one after another. As more and more electric currents hit Ivan's nano armor, he couldn't help but let out a cry of pain, and his body couldn't help but tremble under the stimulation of the electric current. To be continued. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Seong Lang Go. Chapter 408. More than 500 golden guards surrounded Tony, Ivan, Brian, and Fang Heja. These golden guards were incredibly powerful and fearless. With the magic array on their bodies and the magic patterns in their bodies, their physical strength was comparable to that of a dragon. Ordinary attacks could not kill them at all. The four people were like being covered by a human tent. The 500 golden guards completely covered the positions of the four people. From the outside, only countless gold could be seen, and the figures of Tony and the other four could not be seen at all. Under their siege, Ivan, Brian, and Tony among the four seemed to be in danger. Among them, Ivan and Tony had the ability to transform into a werewolf, and Tony's ability was an ability called the Absolute Black Domain, which could turn any part of the body into a black area that absorbs and releases various energies and radiation. The defense of the two of them basically relied on nano armor and mind energy. Although the Absolute Black Domain can absorb the electric current released by the opponent, it cannot withstand the opponent's brute force attack. The only things that can really hurt the Golden Guards are Ivan's high-frequency teeth and claws, and the high-energy radiation in Tony's nano armor. But since Ivan tore apart several Golden Guards' bodies with his high-frequency claws, and Tony killed more than a dozen Golden Guards with high-energy radiation, these Golden Guards no longer fought with them in close combat. They covered each other one after another, casting long-range magic missiles, fireballs and other magic, slowly consuming the two people's mind and armor. Because of the magic of mind connection, their cooperation is tacit, as skilled as the same person. Once Ivan or Tony wants to go forward to chase someone, the others will concentrate their firepower to cover. This is the embarrassment of the ability users. Generally, the ability users have only one ability. After this ability is understood, they are easily targeted, unlike magicians. They have all kinds of different magics for different situations. Even if Tony and Ivan are equipped with nano armor, the singleness of this ability is difficult to overcome. After killing several Golden Guards with the portable high-energy laser in the armor, the opponent changed their tactics again. While covering each other, some people began to release various debuff magic and protective magic, suppressing Ivan and Tony again. Brian and Fang Heja on the other side were also not doing well. Brian had already broken an arm and was seriously injured. Now he could only rely on a few flame wolves to protect him, but facing the Golden Guards' overwhelming offensive, it was the melee that Brian was least good at. After paying a few Golden Guards to attract the firepower of the flame wolves, Brian was soon hit on the head by a sword, and then was pressed to the ground by a group of people and subdued. Fang Heja could ignore the magic and physical attacks of the Golden Guards at the beginning with his ability to virtualize and materialize. He was at ease on the battlefield and directly chopped down more than 20 people with his lightsaber. But after the Golden Guards found that ordinary attacks had no effect on him, they directly moved away from Fang Heja and used the magic of mental shock. Each of them has an indomitable iron-blooded spirit. One by one, they launched suicidal consciousness attacks, directly restraining Fang Heja. Fang Heja finally had time to virtualize his body so that they would not take advantage of the opportunity to subdue him. His entire brain had already fallen into endless attacks. That feeling. It was like having countless lunatics roaring in his head in turn. If he had not been trained specifically for mental attack resistance when he was studying in Academy City, he would have fainted by now. But even so, he was not having a good time. Fang Heja silently recited the formula for resisting mental attacks given to them by the instructor. He barely raised his head and looked at Ivan and Tony in the distance. I saw a giant wolf wrapped in silver-white metal struggling violently, and it kept roaring. But it was still pressed to the ground by more and more Golden Guards. The whole body was full of golden daggers, and the electric current released from the daggers made him tremble. As for Tony, he was completely swallowed up by the crowd, and Fang Heja could only feel that the other party was still resisting by relying on his mind. Looking around, Fang Heja exhaled a breath as he waited for the Golden Guards who were slowly coming up to him to finish their virtualization. He directly took back the lightsaber in his hand. His consciousness was getting more and more drowsy, but he still used all his strength to activate the 10-fist sword in his hand, which had the 5th level red lightning. Fang Heji changed into a physical state again, and the red ring on his right hand also emitted waves of strange light. A red lightning that was more than 50 meters long and as thick as a bucket surged out of it, like a monster's tail, with Fang Heji as the center, and swept towards the golden guards around him. The red lightning has the ability to decompose all matter into atoms. All the things he swept, whether it was the golden guards, or their armor, weapons, and even magic, all disappeared in this sweep. After killing dozens of golden guards with one blow, Fang Heji had returned to the virtual state again before the opponent counterattacked. Next, he kept releasing red lightning, and the virtual truth was transformed irregularly. The golden guards who were swept by the red lightning might be unharmed the moment before, but the next moment they were decomposed into countless atoms that were difficult to detect with the naked eye. On the high platform, the 5 magic marshals all looked at the situation in the Amara basin with expressionless faces. Of course, this level of battle was meaningless in their eyes. In their estimation, it was only a matter of time before the 500 golden guards captured the 4 silver demons. When he saw that more than 10 golden guards were killed by the opponent, Sibelius's eyes already shed a cold light. After all, he personally built this team. Now, if 500 people fight 4, people will still die. It seems that we have to train them well when we go back. Just as Sibelius was thinking this, red lightning was released directly from Fang Heji's hand, killing dozens of golden guards. Narcissus's eyes lit up, and he looked curiously at the red lightning flashing out of Fang Heji's hands from time to time. He ignored the unhappy look on Sibelius's face and said directly, "Interesting, each of these silver demons they all seem to have some innate abilities. Although the attack form is single, these innate abilities are very powerful and interesting." Another bald magic marshal who has been silent since he came to power. Leviathan, who had always remained silent, said, "This red lightning is a bit like a disintegration ray, but the decomposition ability seems to be more thorough than the disintegration ray, and looking at the appearance of the silver demon, it seems that he consumes a lot of money to cast this ray. Lo." He then said to Sibelius, "I am currently studying how to improve the disintegration ray. I want this silver demon. Tell your men that I want to live." "No problem." Sibelius squinted his eyes, and bursts of cold light were released in his eyes. Under Fang Heji's attack, the golden guards were killed and retreated steadily. Although there are many of them, they are still unable to fight against the red lightning that can decompose all things. He could only rely on continuous mental attacks to harass Fang Heji. Seeing that the golden guards he personally trained were fighting 4 out of 500, and they were still struggling for so long. Although the golden guards at his feet brought a total of 20,000, if he sent them again, Sibelius would be defeated. Feeling that he was embarrassed in front of the other 4 magic marshals, he directly spoke to his adjutant in the distance through communication magic. "Sibella, go and capture all 4 silver demons alive," he said coldly. "I will put them on the dissection table one by one." Under the platform, a female magician nodded and immediately flew towards the location where Fang Heji and the other 3 were. Before she dared to reach the sky above the 4 of them, an ultra-long-distance gravity spell had been cast. Ivan and Tony, who had just been rescued by Fang Heji, were immediately pressed to the ground, and every bone made a creaking sound. Brian, who was already seriously injured, spat out a mouthful of blood and fainted. But those golden guards were completely unaffected by the gravity spell and seemed unscathed. Although Fang Heji was temporarily unscathed due to the virtualization. But looking at the mage flying towards him at high speed in the distance, he had no hope that he and others could escape. The golden guards on the side slowly moved towards the surroundings under Sibella's command. Instead of continuing the attack, they surrounded Fang Heji and the other 4. Ivan lay on the ground, letting out bursts of wolf howls, and then roared, we can't be captured alive by them. I'm going to release the glory bomb, Fang. I know you can become invisible, you can escape by yourself, or I can help. Let's bring a letter. Tony naturally knew what the glorious bomb Ivan was talking about was. It was a miniature tactical nuclear bomb carried in their nano armor. Only those who were sent to inspect the Magic Star were equipped with this kind of killer weapon. Just in case. Although Tony was unwilling to release the glory bomb so early, according to his idea, even if he wanted to self-destruct, he would have to wait until he was caught in the opponent's military camp before self-destructing. However, when he thought of the endless methods of those magicians, he was afraid that they would take control once they arrived at the military camp. He can no longer use his own body and nano armor. He sighed helplessly and said to Fanghaja, Ivan is right, you can use virtualization to escape underground quickly, we will self-destruct first. But Fanghaja wanted to persuade the two of them, but he didn't know where to start. He remembered that Li Anping had left him a drop of blood, but even if his combat power were multiplied several times, he might not be able to take away his companions in front of the opponent's 5 magic marshals, as well as countless mages and soldiers. Just when he hesitated, a gunshot was heard. Then the sound of continuous gunshots reached the ears of the 3 people. I saw hundreds of silver-white warriors wrapped in nano armor, holding gauze rifles, walking step by step towards the direction of the Golden Guard. In the hail of bullets brought by high-speed rifles, tens of thousands of bullets fell on these Golden Guards every second, beating them back steadily. After noticing the amazing defensive power of the Golden Guards, they immediately changed the way bullets fire. A method was adopted to reduce the concentration of firepower on the target. Part of the Golden Guards, which was fired by thousands of bullets, was torn into pieces in an instant. An unprecedented weapon and an attack method that had never appeared on the Mondo continent. This sudden attack directly blinded the Golden Guards. But seeing the familiar sight, Tony, Ivan, and Fanghaja showed bursts of excitement. At the same time, a familiar voice reached their ears from the communication screen of the nano armor. Bai Xing said, sorry to keep you waiting for so long. The boundary crossing gate has been opened. You should retreat under the cover of the troops first. At the same time, Sebela, who had rushed over, also retreated. Because the 5 magic marshals had seen from the high platform that dense white torrents slowly emerged from the depths of the basin. Sabelius said coldly, it's just like ants hiding in a pit. Finally came out. Michelle smiled charmingly, the number is more than expected. Are they coming from the gate of hell to support? In short, the whole army will attack. Narcissus waved his hand and shot a huge flame into the air, which exploded like a firework. That was the signal for the whole army to attack. Kill all these beasts. With the order of the magic marshal, millions of soldiers of all colors took action. They roared, shouted, and cheered as they ran towards the Amara Basin and the battlefield. The 5 empires joined forces under the will of the demigods, with more than 1 million troops, various elite arms, more than 100 magicians, and the 5 magic marshals personally. Every soldier believed that victory would belong to him, and that it was time for them to make achievements. The tall earthen wall shook slowly, and under the control of the magician, one gate after another was opened directly out of thin air. Countless soldiers in armor filed out. Because of the magic blessing, ordinary soldiers on the Mondo continent had long been only infantry, because other arms were no longer necessary. Under the magic infusion of hundreds of magicians, each of these soldiers was extremely powerful, walking like the wind, and flashing colorful lights on their bodies. Then magicians of various levels followed them. Behind them, there were also giant dragons flying up from behind the fortifications, and under the command of the magician, they swooped towards the Amara Basin. The basin, which was originally wrapped in countless flames, was annihilated by the rain falling from the sky. Michel dispersed the magic, and the water vapor and dark clouds disappeared together, and the sunshine after the rain fell on the earth. Two worlds, two civilizations, the first war between them finally started at this moment. To be continued. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiong Go. Chapter 409. Countless soldiers rushed towards the Amara Basin like a tsunami. With countless magic enhancements, each of them ran like a 100-meter champion. The fanatical belief in magic directly surged into their hearts, making them rush forward regardless of everything. Because the forest was almost completely burned, the entire Amara Basin appeared in front of them. Victor held a long sword and ran forward with his captain. As a member of the vanguard, he could see at a glance that countless evil demons were staring at them on the land several miles away. These evil demons all had silver-white scales, which made Victor's eyes flash with greed. Like him, his companions around him have already begun to think about how to peel off the skin of these silver demons and exchange the silver on them for money. But Victor hadn't reacted yet. He only heard a series of light sounds in his ears. His companions fell down one after another. Then he felt a pain in his chest. His whole body seemed to be torn apart by something. The next moment, his eyes went black and he lost consciousness. The soldiers standing in the back row were even more at a loss. They didn't know what attack they were under. They could only vaguely see the crackling sound of the silver demons on the opposite side. The people on their side fell down in rows like wheat. Some of their bodies were directly torn apart, and some had blood holes directly, as if there was some invisible attack against them. A team leader reacted and shouted, "Be careful, those silver demons can be invisible." The soldiers around immediately stopped. They fiddled with the weapons in their hands, as if they were chopping a group of ghosts that could not be seen by the naked eye. Some of them were smarter and grabbed the sand under their feet, trying to sprinkle it on the invisible silver demons, but it had no effect at all. How the soldiers attacked. They couldn't find the so-called invisible enemies, but the enemies' attacks became more and more muffled. Under the impact of the gauze rifle array, these medieval magic soldiers were like a group of peasants coming out of the mountain. They had no power to resist and fell one after another, leaving large pieces of corpses on the ground. The two sides exchanged fire for only a few minutes, and tens of thousands of coalition soldiers had fallen. Soldiers using gauze rifles even had to retreat and change because of overheating of the barrel. However, a magician on the coalition side finally reacted. It's the silver demon on the opposite side. They shot a kind of metal particles that are difficult to see with the naked eye at a very fast speed. Let the soldiers gather together, and the magician will use magic to resist the attack. Through communication and some magic connected with the mind, the entire coalition commanded it as if it were an arms command. At the command, the soldiers in the front row shrank their formation and gathered together. In front of them was a huge stone made of magic, as hard as steel, blocking the soldiers, and they were pushed forward. At first, the Earth Army tried to smash the stone balls with continuous shooting with high-speed rifles, but they soon gave up doing so because although they could smash the stone balls, the opponent's magicians would soon create them again. Seeing that the opponent stopped shooting, the soldiers in the front row of the coalition all shouted, "Kill them all! Send them back to hell!" But just as their shouting began, a more terrifying and sharp voice sounded, suppressing all the shouting. And along with this sound, there was also a series of terrible vibrations, which were like the whole earth shaking. A team leader looked up at the sky, and somehow, when he heard this voice, he felt a sense of danger in his heart, but he couldn't figure out where this danger came from. But the next moment, he witnessed what the danger was. A 152 mm high explosive bomb flew to a position 10 meters away from him. With a loud bang, the hot and sharp pieces flew in all directions. The shock wave mixed with the shrapnel, directly blew the soldiers within 40 or 50 meters around into pieces. The position where the squad leader stood has become part of a huge crater. The power of this high explosive bomb with armor-breaking effect far exceeds the imagination of the coalition soldiers. The most important thing is that these things are all produced in an assembly line. Just next to the boundary gate, a total of more than 80 heavy artillery that were urgently dispatched are roaring wildly. Steel gunpowder turned into flowers of death and bloomed all over the coalition camp. The dense formation that just resisted the Gauss rifles became the best target at this moment. In addition to high explosive bombs, there are also incendiary bombs that can produce a high temperature of more than 2,500 degrees. The main components of these incendiary bombs are ferric oxide, aluminum powder, and magnesium powder. Even water cannot extinguish them. But the other side obviously didn't know this. Some magicians tried to put out the fire with water, but under such huge heat, water would become a combustion aid, and the hydrogen produced would only increase the fire on the soldiers. Even if they jumped into the water, they couldn't put out the flames, but would be boiled alive by the boiling water. In addition, there are armor-piercing shells, electromagnetic cannons, and plasma cannons specially prepared for magicians. The protective force field of ordinary magicians has no way to resist such terrible high-tech weapons. Any electromagnetic cannon or plasma cannon can blow them into pieces or evaporate them into ions. The entire battlefield seemed to have turned into a huge oven, and even the air became scorching hot. Many soldiers were not killed by the shells, but their entire bodies began to melt from the inside because they inhaled the scorching air. The mages used protective force fields, fireproof barriers, and teleportation over and over again. However, the advantages of groupization and systematization brought by technology were fully demonstrated on the battlefield at this moment. Shells bloomed in the camp of the coalition forces like an endless stream. In just over 10 minutes, most of the magic apprentices, lower-level mages, and even upper-level mages had already entered the embarrassing situation of running out of magic power. On the Earth Army side, they were close to the cross-boundary gate and the folding gate. Not to mention more than 10 minutes, they could bomb without hesitation for more than 10 hours or 10 days, not to mention more than 10 minutes, and would not leave even a single corpse for the other side. In the first battle between the two worlds, the magic coalition forces fell into a desperate situation because they did not understand the weapons of the Earth. If they had approached the coalition forces with space magic at the beginning, or used a small number of wizards to sneak attack the armored forces, the possibility of winning would be much greater. But they chose to directly fight the opponent's Iron Lion with their army. In the eyes of the soldiers, countless monsters from hell roared and could spit out magic fire that could never be extinguished. These magic fires fell from the sky, and even the mages could not resist them. When the coalition left more than 200,000 corpses on the field, the magic marshals on the platform finally couldn't help it. This was not what they imagined. However, although the power of these demons' weapons exceeded their imagination and surprised them, the 5 magic marshals never thought that they would lose. Magic is eternal, and this idea has long been deeply rooted. Moreover, each of them believes that although the weapons of the demons are sharp, they still can't hurt them. You have all taken action, let me do it this time. Leviathan slowly walked to the edge of the platform, only to see him put his hands together, accompanied by a sound of spells, and then pointed out with one finger, and saw a dazzling white light directly shot out with his fingertips and fell into the camp of the Earth Alliance. The terrifying white light brought an astonishingly low temperature. The terrifying cold air instantly spread around. The low temperature of more than -230 degrees directly turned the soldiers wearing nano armor into ice cubes. The heavy artillery that was firing in the back was also not spared. They were specially targeted by Leviathan. 1/3 of the heavy artillery was covered by the cold air and turned into ice sculptures. To be continued. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xianglang Go. Chapter 410. Seeing the opponent's freezing ray directly causing huge casualties, Not only Bai Xing frowned, but also the incarnation of the mind after passing through the boundary gate had a cold light on his face. In fact, just now above the earth troops, Fang Yahuang had opened 33 caves to defend, but the opponent's attack was of the light type, and it had no effect at a distance of tens of thousands of kilometers, and thousands of people were killed directly by the opponent. If it were not for the protective power of the nano armor, and Fang Yahuang's second move to stop the spread of cold air, the number of casualties would probably be 10 times more. On the other hand, although the incarnation of the mind had to sit in the boundary gate to prevent accidents from happening here in the White Land, it did not mean that he could not take action at all. Because the boundary gate is too close to the current battlefield. I saw a palm composed of pitch-black mind energy directly pass through the boundary gate, and then hit the position of the 5 magic marshals in the air. Under the blessing of terrifying power, after the incarnation of mind energy struck out with a palm, a huge palm composed entirely of white air waves shot out directly from the position of the traversal gate, like a giant palm holding up the sky, and blasted towards the high platform where the 5 magic marshals were located. Ancient System Ability Sumeru Palm. Although the incarnation of mind energy does not have the powerful electromagnetic drive and material reorganization ability of Li Enping, the void force field plus the mental force field still allows him to have combat power above the 6th energy level. I saw the white airflow forming a huge palm, just like the Buddha descending to the world, or the collapse of Mount Sumi, with a pure force that was so strong that it was a mess, and it slammed hard towards the high platform more than 10 miles away. Wherever it passed, it seemed that even the space made a creaking sound under the pressure of this force, as if it was about to break under the heavy load. Several magicians who tried to resist in the sky were all crushed into pieces. There was also a giant dragon rushing towards the giant palm, trying to block the Sumi palm, but as soon as his body approached the white giant palm in the sky, it was directly blown up by a palm. It turned into a large blood rain that sprinkled on the ground. The white Sumi palm did not stop, and in a blink of an eye it had already arrived above the high platform, and slapped the position of the 5 magic marshals fiercely. Seeing the terrifying giant palm that fell from the sky like the sky, and feeling the terrifying power contained in it, even the faces of the 5 magic marshals changed. "It's the king of evil demons, let's stop him together," SpecialAbilities shouted, and his robes were completely shattered, turning into countless fragments and scattering, revealing his entire upper body. On his skin, countless magic circles flashing with orchid light flashed, as if coated with some kind of luminous fuel. That was the ultimate magic circle that SpecialAbilities had blessed himself with. As the most skilled magic circle among the magicians in the entire continent, the magic circles and magic patterns he had placed on his body and body far exceeded those of the Golden Guards. His body shook violently, and white air waves had already gushed out from his body. Almost every muscle in his body vibrated with tens of tons of power. In the blast of the strong wind, SpecialAbilities had already jumped high in one step. The strength of his whole body had reached an incredible level under the layers of amplification of the magic circle. His right fist, with the power comparable to that of dozens of giant dragons, smashed fiercely at the prajna palm that fell from the sky. Wherever the fist passed, it tore the atmosphere and made a harsh sonic boom. This punch alone was enough to blow down a mountain, and it might even directly create a canyon. Seeing that SpecialAbilities was more like a warrior than a mage, the other few people didn't care at all, and it was obvious that they had known Sibelius's fighting style for a long time. What a powerful demon king! Just compare the strength. He has surpassed all the wizards. We must stop him. Help SpecialAbilities. Just when SpecialAbilities made the first move, the strong wind brought by the prajna palm had already directly pressed on everyone, and the intense wind pressure even made it difficult for them to speak. So the remaining 4 magic marshals also made their moves one after another. The necklace on Michelle's neck emitted a burst of blue light. A huge water dragon with a thickness of more than 5 meters, with enough power to submerge a city, has roared and rushed up. On the other side, Issa, Narcissus, and Leviathan also released magic such as Titan's Grip, Sun Impact, and Phase Revolving Door, which were incompatible with Sibelius's hard-hitting style. They either wanted to use a little force to reverse the direction of the giant palm, or they wanted to reduce the air contained in the giant palm by high temperature, space, etc., making it difficult to exert the power without a medium. In short, the 5 magic marshals attacked together, releasing enough power to destroy the world, and jointly attacked the terrifying magic palm that fell from the sky. With a loud rumble, visible ripples burst out directly from the contact point between the two sides, shattering all the clouds in the surrounding sky. The terrible sound waves directly knocked down the surrounding earth walls and the soldiers under the high platform, causing widespread grief. Facing the full resistance of the 5 magic marshals, Li Anping's Prajnapam was like the 5-finger mountain of Tathagata Buddha. Although it paused for a while after colliding with the opponent's attack, it finally pressed down without hesitation, deeply crushing the entire high platform. A thunderous explosion sounded above the coalition's head. The platform over 150 meters high was blown up by Li Anping's palm from top to bottom, just like a sand tower on the beach collapsed under the impact of huge waves. SpecialAbilities, who rushed to the front, spit out a large mouthful of blood. The whole person was blown away by the fierce force and fell to the ground. The remaining 4 magic marshals saw that the situation was not good, and finally used their own means to avoid the attack range of the Prajnapam. The incarnation of mind energy stretched out the finger of the piercing gate and lightly tapped. The next moment, 5 laser cannons had been fired along the horizon. However, because the planet is round, these 5 laser cannons finally pierced the atmosphere of the magic star directly and completely submerged the bodies of the 5 magic marshals. But Li Anping was surprised. In addition to SpecialAbilities completely absorbing the energy of the laser cannon into his body surface, the other 4 magic marshals also used their own means to resist the power of the laser cannon. But even so, they were already seriously injured. The incarnation of Mind Chi retracted his palm, and then a cold snort came from behind the gate. "What are you still standing there for? Fang Yahuang stays to help the army defend. Bai Xing, Emma, Xiaolikang and Woody, you go up and snipe those magic marshals. They were seriously injured by my attack, but they are not dead yet." With Li Anping's order, the artillery fire sounded again, and the engineering robots kept running back and forth from both sides of the gate, transporting the components of the giant cannons one after another, and then assembling them. In fact, the size of the gate severely restricted the armed forces of the human side. If the gate was big enough, Bai Xing would have wanted to directly drive the Federation's air fortress or the air carrier that the Royal Academy of Sciences had built over, so that it would be easier to fight. However, the war was just around the corner, and it was already the limit to just use the pre-prepared components to splice various artillery, plasma cannons, and electromagnetic cannons, not to mention building an aircraft carrier or fortress here again. As the sound of artillery sounded again, the casualties in the opponent's camp increased to an incredible rate again, with thousands of people dying under the muzzle of the Earth Army's artillery almost every minute. The opponent's coalition forces obviously knew that this was not a solution. More than 90 magicians who survived the artillery fire led the participating upper and lower magicians and rushed directly to the position of the Earth Army with magic. Various acceleration, illusion, teleportation and other magics were used in succession, and they deliberately dispersed to avoid the siege of artillery fire, and they were about to reach the Earth Army's camp in a blink of an eye. Artillery fire is very useful in dense camps, but it is very difficult to deal with such a team with only a few hundred people, scattered, and still using magic to rush. So we saw that on the Earth Army side, thousands of people with abilities wearing silver armor rushed out and greeted the rushing magicians, setting off a bloody battle. For a while, the people sent by the Great Xia Dragon Bird, the Federation, and the human armed forces faced the magicians. The furious artillery fire continued to tilt towards the opponent's camp. and several level 5 ability users in the Earth Army set their sights on the opponent's strongest person. Emma opened a portal that led directly to 10 miles away, and was about to send herself and several people to the opponent's magic marshal. Bizink stopped SpecialAbilities and others. He looked at the direction of the battle between the magicians and the ability users. Because the two teams were entangled, they lost the support of artillery fire. Facing a large number of magicians on the other side, the ability users retreated step by step. The endless magic methods of the other side were far beyond the ability of these ability users to fight. You guys go over there to provide support. I'll go alone with the 5 magic marshals. SpecialAbilities was surprised and said, "Are you sure? Those 5 guys are probably very powerful. Even His Majesty couldn't kill them with one blow. And magic is particularly difficult to deal with." "Humph, don't worry. I am a world apart from 2 months ago." After saying this, Bizink walked into the portal without looking back. "Emma, I'll close the portal after I go in, so that they won't get in." After looking at Bizink, who disappeared in the portal, the remaining few nodded and rushed directly to the battlefield between the ability users and the magicians. In the short period of fighting, several magicians even broke through the encirclement and rushed into the array of the Earth Army, either killing ordinary soldiers or blowing up several artillery positions. To be continued.